The FNCS Major 2 Grand Finals are officially over. Today I'm going to discuss how every duo performed. Let's start off by talking about the winners. Let's discuss Sky and Scroll because they were ridiculously consistent throughout the whole tournament. They have now got their second ever FNCS win, managing 2 in a row as well, which is just insanely impressive. They finished 158 points clear of the team in second, so it was a dominant performance. They didn't really have any bad games. It kind of just felt inevitable from the start of the tournament that they were going to win, and they didn't drop off once. It was just ridiculously consistent. I can't praise them enough, really. Sky was the MVP for the second Grand Finals in a row. He had the joint most eliminations with 32. He also had the most damage and the top damage ratio. Genuinely incredible stuff from him. Scroll was great as well. He had 22 eliminations, both players pulling their weight. Now listen, with this placement, I do believe that Sky and Scroll, the Danish duo, become the greatest team in European Fortnite history. I don't think we've ever seen a duo, a trio, any sort of team hit the levels that these guys have managed. Their consistency in this Grand Finals and Major 1 as well has just been nothing short of remarkable. They came first for both days in these finals. They did the same thing in Major 1. I mean, nobody can stop them. This was the question we were asking all throughout the tournament. Can anyone stop Sky and Scroll? When they were in first place after day 1, is anyone going to be able to stop them on day 2? And the answer is simply no. They literally came out and won Game 7, the first game after the break, and I mean, from there, it just looked so inevitable. I honestly don't even have the words to describe how good Sky and Scroll were. Now, if we're going to talk about their actual performance, as I've mentioned, it was their consistency that got them over the line. They did get a lot of elims, but their average placement was leagues above all the other teams in the lobby. The other strength I would say they had was their adaptability. They were very versatile throughout the tournament. We know that they like to build their one surge base in their drop spot of Frosted Flats, and then Scroll will sit on the low ground, farming materials, gathering up heals, while Sky is in the surge base getting tags. They actually switched this up in a few games. Sometimes they built 2 surge bases in order to maximize the amount of tags they were getting. In other matches they attempted to go for lurks, such as here where they set up a nice kill onto Wox and were then able to get the damage from that, and they built this big tunnel afterwards since the zone did pull north. And that is a point that I do want to make. A lot of the zones in this tournament did pull away from Frosted Flats to the northwest of the map, but Sky and Scroll did not let that affect them whatsoever. They had a clear, established game plan for what they would do if the zone pulled far, and they pulled it off to perfection every single time. I mean, listen, I am just lost for words, and it's a far cry from how they started the season. They did look a little bit poor in the first 2 divisional cups. Of course, they had the disappointment of the Summit Land going into the halfway point of that tournament in first, but then not being able to continue that momentum throughout the cup. As this season has gone on, they have improved a lot. Of course, Heats was a bit of a disappointment though, only finishing in 13th place, very narrowly qualifying for the Grand Finals. I mean, we nearly didn't even see them here at all, but the levels they were showing were just nothing short of insane. I mean, what a turnaround they've had. They even had teams trying to drop on them in games 10 and 11, and they brushed it off like it was nothing. They just simply demolished anyone that tried to contest them off spawn, as they have done all season. The Danish duo also showed adaptability during the end games. We know them as a low ground duo, and indeed that is where we saw them spend most of their time during this tournament, but they did pop up on height on the mid ground as well, showing that they are versatile, showing that they can play any sort of Fortnite that they need in order to win. Listen, I could talk all day long going round in circles about how good Sky and Scroll are, but the bottom line is they were just unbelievable during these finals. They are by far the best team in Europe, and I would say by far the best team in the world as well. The levels they are showing, it's ridiculous, it's unmatched. They are changing the game. In second place we had Shark and Teeny. Now these guys were my predictions to win. They were many people's favourites as well, and they did actually play quite well during these finals, but unfortunately they were overshadowed by the sheer brilliance of Sky and Scroll. Shark and Teeny were brilliant on day 2. They did push Sky and Scroll all the way, but ultimately they couldn't match the consistency of the Danish duo. They were aggressive as per usual. Teeny had the joint most eliminations with 32, Shark contributing as well. Some games they were sitting in surge bases, some games they were keying the teams around them. It was a great performance overall from them. Day 2 was a lot better than day 1. In the first day they did kind of struggle. They had a lot of early deaths. They were overcommitting in fights. They were dying in the partial zones, but they fixed all of that on day 2. Ultimately it wasn't quite enough to secure the win, but listen, Shark and Teeny are, in my opinion, clearly the second best team on the region. They are playing at a high standard, and if it wasn't for the sheer brilliance of of Sky and Scroll, then potentially they could have come away with their first ever FNCS win. It's also worth noting that the meta changes that happened just a few days before Grand Finals did affect this duo. The Stinger SMG got removed, which was one of Shark's favourite guns, and it got replaced with the Spire rifle, which did change the way that Surge played out in these finals. So who knows, maybe if that hadn't have shifted, Shark and Tina could have done better, but a second place is still really solid. In third place we had Swizzy and Pixie, and a lot of the discourse before the tournament started was about whether they would key Twek and Mydro at their POI of the Battlewoods. We know that all season Swizzy and Pixie have maintained that they want every single bit of loot at that area, and they have keyed anyone that tries to take it off them. In these finals though, they were a little bit more sensible. They did decide to split with the Dutch duo, which ultimately was a good decision, as Swizzy and Pixie have managed a third place. I will say that they did get very fortunate with the zones, but listen, at the end of the day, you do still have to play well even with that kind of luck. There are a lot of teams that did have fortunate zones in these finals and were not able to take advantage of it. So fair play to Swizzy and Pixie. Of course, they are already qualified for Globals, but a nice performance from them. One duo that isn't already qualified to Globals though, and we will be seeing them in Belgium in September, is Cami and Hari. The Polish duo put on a great performance, finishing in 4th place. And again, fortunate zones, but again, you do have to play well, and they did put in some very consistent performances. I had people saying I was crazy for predicting them in my top 5, but they have proved me right. A really solid performance. Hari in particular was on fire. His output was insane as per usual. He had 27 eliminations, the 3rd highest in the lobby. A really solid performance from the Polish duo, and again, we will be seeing them in Antwerp alongside Focus and Thomas HD. Now, they had already booked their ticket from the Summit Land, but they did manage a 5th place in these finals, and honestly, they were kind of playing on difficult mode all throughout. They were contested all of day one by Rick Narder and Kivski, a fellow Danish duo, and Focus and Thomas did get the better of them, but the spawn fights did very much derail their mid games, and they did struggle on day 1. Day 2 was a lot better. They were uncontested, but the zones were not in their favour. Feels like a familiar story whenever we're discussing Focus and Thomas HD. They do like to land at these southwestern POIs, and zones do not always pull that far over. So not an ideal day for this duo, but they are going to stick together. We will be seeing them at Globals, and I do still think their future is pretty bright. In 6th place, we have the UK duo of King, Cringe and Twy, and these guys were great during the tournament. They finished in 2nd place after day 1, despite having 2 teams landing on their split for some of the games. Crazy consistency from them. They were landing at a pretty suboptimal part of the map, but their game plan was very strong. They were basing up on the mountain for Surge. They were being proactive with their rotates, getting into zone early to make sure they had priority positions. It was really good stuff from them on day 1. Day 2 got a bit messy. They ended up with 4 teams landing on them, and they just couldn't really perform with that kind of chaos over at their drop spot. So you can't really blame them for finishing outside of the top 5. It looked like they could challenge for the win at one point, but unfortunately it did slip away. But nonetheless, we will be seeing them at the Global Championships. And King, Cringe and Twy, 2 very, very good players. I mean, King Cringe, someone who was great during the off season, someone who worked super hard, playing in all the victory cups, playing every region, and the work has paid off. And Twy, a very underrated fragger, one of the most underrated fighters in the world, I would say. Such a great player, good output as well, and they are spearheading the revival of UK Fortnite. And as you're about to see, they are not the only UK duo that qualified for these finals. More on that in a minute. In 7th place, we had Chino and Pablo Wingu, and this is about where I expected them to finish. They are a duo that of course have a lot of quality, but since the Summit Land, they haven't really been contending for Divisional Cup wins. I didn't really expect them to finish inside the top 3. They didn't play badly by any means. They were surprise contested for a part of day 1 by the Polish Joker duo of Wi-Fi and Borsuk, so that did kind of derail things for them. They finished 19th for day 1. Day 2 was a lot better. They were much more consistent, but overall 7th isn't bad. It's about where I expected given their relative lack of form. But Chino and Pablo, I mean, this is a duo that have a lot of quality, a lot of firepower, and I would like to see them challenging for top 3s, top 5s in the near future. In 8th place, we had iDrop and Gonzo. Now, this is a team that not many people expected to do well because they were meant to be contested by Pink and Haris over at the bus stop split. They did end up actually splitting the whole area, which meant that iDrop and Gonzo got the mythic pistol every single game, and that allowed them to have a crazy start to the tournament. Honestly, their last 3 games of the cup were pretty pretty poor. They did go down a lot. Had it not been for that, they would have finished maybe in the top 3 or 4. They were on that kind of trajectory. It was really good stuff from them. iDrop, of course, a player that has been around in the scene for years now. Gonzo, a very underrated fragger, someone who has popped up over the last 6 to 9 months. So this duo had a lot of potential on paper. We didn't think they'd do well because of their situation, but they made the intelligent decision to split the POI, and ultimately that has booked them a ticket to Globals. Now, I promised we'd come back to the UK duos. Velo and Zynox finished in 9th place. They didn't lose once off spawn on day 1, and they were able to get some games completely uncontested over at Latte Landing, which is insane considering the fact that it was meant to be triple conned in game 1. Of course, they left Savage's Mountain Split, which is where they were initially landing. They left an unconned split to go to triple conned Latte Landing, which a lot of people, including myself, were questioning, but Velo and Zynox obviously knew what they were doing. It did pay off, and they have now qualified for Globals. We will be seeing Mr. No Remorse himself at LAN in his own home country of Belgium. Credit to these two, man. I mean, Velo is someone that came up playing with King Cringe in the off season. As I mentioned earlier, they were really working hard, really doing well, and they are now seeing the rewards. Zynox, again, someone that plays every region, someone that did consistently put in the hours on the game. It's nice to see that both of these guys worked hard when other players weren't grinding as much, and they are now reaping the rewards. In 10th place, we had Chap and Flixie, and this is about what we expected. No one really views them as a win contender anymore, so a top 10 honestly isn't too bad, especially when you consider the fact that the zones were horrendous for them. They didn't get one zone in 12 games, so you can cut them a little bit of slack. Day 2, they were solid as well. They finished 5th place over those 6 games, so overall, not a bad placement. They were already qualified for Globals, and we will be seeing them in Belgium. In 11th place, we had Rax and Yanis, and I'm super happy that they made it through. Rax is someone that's had a bit of a tough year up until this point, of course. He was disappointing in Major 1, not qualifying for Grand Finals with SETI, and he was viewed as one of the best prospects at the time. It did feel like he took a little bit of a step back with that. Now he is back at the forefront of EU Fortnite. He is clearly one of the brightest players that we have here in Europe, and I'm super excited to see how the young Italian prospect does on the world stage. And credit to Yanis too, someone that's been around for so long now, a very, very underrated player, a 3 times FNCS champion, and we will be seeing him back at Globals. He of course did make the Summit Land with cheating, but I do think that with Rax he has a better chance of performing well. In terms of their actual games during this tournament, their big issue was not making it into enough end games. This was especially apparent on day 1. Yanis said he was super happy with his mid-game IGLing. It was just their end games that did let them down. They fixed this up on day 2. They did improve, and they have now been able to qualify for Globals. In 12th place, we had Darm and Dimash, again a team that have already booked their ticket to Antwerp, but not the craziest performance from the Polish team. They were surprise contested on day 1 by Dan Depuzo and Azatgo, a team that only found out they were playing FNCS Grand Finals on the day because Della and Alec ended up getting disqualified, so not ideal for Darm and Dimash there. They were uncon on day 2, and they did have their moments like Darm when he hit 9 eliminations in this particular match, but overall they just weren't quite able to get up to speed. They weren't quite able to challenge for the win, and I do think they'll probably be a bit upset with this performance. Now, there were 9 available global spots for this tournament, which means that the next 4 duos have all booked their tickets to Antwerp. In 13th place, we had the very underrated duo of Tiddy and Eula, and these guys were a team that I predicted to do well, but certainly not this well. I mean, fair play to them. They were landing right over at the west of the map, and they really made that split work for them. They were 7th after day 1. They did just about enough to hang on the second day. Really impressive stuff from them. Eula is a player that I have spoken about in previous videos. He had the most eliminations in week 1 of the Divisional Cup Opens, so he was someone that was doing well right at the beginning of the season, and he has kept up that momentum throughout into these Grand Finals. Tiddy as well, a very underrated Dutch player. We will be seeing both of them at their first ever LAN in Antwerp, so fair play to them. In 14th place, we had the Russian-speaking duo of Fant and Halekis. Again, another team that I really did not expect to see this high up. I actually had them in my bottom 10 for the predictions, purely because they were landing near Sharkantini, and I thought they would just get W-keyed every game. They were actually meant to be contested as well, which did factor into my reasoning, but they were able to defeat Zestful and Super Ice so many times that they ended up getting the spot on con for most of the tournament, and from there, they were able to make the end games. They made things work for them, and we will be seeing them in Belgium. And it is really cool seeing underrated teams go to LAN. I do like seeing new faces qualifying. Another duo that have booked their tickets is Nebs and Nathan. Now these guys, another UK team, and they were one of the most informed duos duos going into these finals. They of course are the reigning Divisional Cup champions. They nearly won another one as well. They've been in crazy form. Heats wasn't great for them, and day one of grand finals wasn't good either, if we're being honest. They had a very strong finish to the tournament, managing 2 top 10 finishes in those last 2 games, including a 3rd place in game 12 to just about sneak into these global spots, because honestly it didn't look like it was on the cards for most of the tournament. Fair play to them, they did just about enough, but I did expect a little bit of a higher finish, especially from the uncontested mid-map split. And in 16th place, the final EU team to qualify for globals, apart from one special duo that I will mention later, is the Polish team of Pix and Fyron. Now Pix is someone that has had a ton of different teammates over the past few months, and he's very much struggled to have one that was stable, to stick with someone for a long period of time, and it looks like he may finally have found his perfect teammate. Fyron, of course, a fellow Polish player, someone that is very underrated. They did really well despite landing near Sargentini. I was worried that they might get keyed in some of the games, but no, they held their own, they played out their games, and they just about managed to secure that global spot. Fair play to them. As I say, it's definitely a bit of a random mix of teams that will be going to globals. You've got obviously the best duos on the region, you've got some wild card shouts and a couple of good prospects too, but I'm really happy with the teams we're sending, and I do think EU is going to perform very well in Antwerp. Now, let's talk about some of the teams that did underperform. We had Vico and Malabuka in 20th place. Now, of course, they are already qualified for globals because they literally won the Summit LAN, but these finals were really poor, if we're being honest. They were 8th after day 1. It already wasn't great, and on day 2, things fell apart even more. They were dying in pretty much every single mid-game fight they took. It seemed like their heads were gone. They just couldn't really get a grip on the finals. Vico did take to Twitter after the games were done, stating that he felt like he could have put more work in, that he got complacent after the Summit LAN win, which is good to hear. I mean, it's good to hear him taking accountability, and of course I do hope that Vico and Malabuka do improve for the Global Championship in a month's time, but it's fair to say that these finals weren't great. They just looked shaky. They weren't great in the end games, and they didn't even really make it to the end games in most instances, so not a finals that they will want to remember. As you can see from the leaderboard, there were some other duos that were quite close to qualifying for globals, Izzy and Nosif being the best example. They were really solid on day 2. They had a crazy comeback. Day 1, they were one of the teams that were affected by the absolute chaos going on in the southeast corner of the map, with spawn fights changing every single game. You never knew who was going to land on you, and Izzy and Nosif were victims of that situation, but unfortunately they were just about unable to book their tickets to Antwerp. Cringe and Volko came close as well. They split Wonky Land on day 2. Had they not tried to fight it on day 1, then maybe things could have been different. I know Hutty and Fishix were quite aggressive too, so that did kind of play into what happened. Pink and Haris nearly made it. Of course, they did split the bus stop split with iDrop and Gonzo, but they weren't quite able to have as much success as their neighbours. Let's move on to talking about Mr. Savage and Truly, because they had a lightning quick start to the tournament. They won game 1. Things were looking so great. They ended day 1 inside the top 10. It looked like they were going to qualify for globals, and on day 2 things just fell apart. I know zones weren't great, but there were some questionable decisions, especially in game 12 when they decided to abandon their mountain POI and land directly on top of Fridoxy and Marius. But I mean, Fridoxy is one of the best off-spawn players in the world. It's kind of a bold decision to choose them out of all teams to land on. I know Savage does know that split quite well, but still, I'm not sure I can get behind that decision. They did end up going down very early, thus ending their chances of making globals. So definitely a shame. Savage and Truly will be sticking together for the last chance finals. If you don't know, there are still 3 more duos that can qualify out of Europe for globals from the last chance finals. So Savage is still in with a chance, but this was a little bit of a setback. Moving down the leaderboard, we've got Acer and Turtle, who did play okay. Hellfire and Wimper were good on day 2. We've got Pixovsky and Seren, who were 9th after day 1, but did struggle to replicate that form on the second day. They were getting keyed a bit more. We saw them below Surge on a couple of occasions as well. We've got Sires and Scary Sean in 25th. Again, not really a great performance from them. They were worse on day 2. It was a similar pattern to the last major, where they were, of course, first after day 1 and then fell off a little bit on the second day. This time, not quite as good, but we will still be seeing them in Antwerp because they, of course, booked their tickets at the Summit LAN. We had Frosty and Josh 75 and 26th. bit of a disappointment for them as well, considering the fact that they were 11th after day one, but it is both of their debut grand finals and they can be very proud of how they performed. A 26th is really solid considering it was their first time playing. I'll pick out some of the bigger names from the rest of the duos. We had Kiro and Wox finishing 29th. Pretty disappointing considering they had Shaken Sanctuary completely uncontested. Zabi is now going to be playing with Wox, so they have officially split, and yeah, it wasn't a great performance from them. We had Fredoxy and Marius in 38th as well, and as I alluded to earlier, not a great placement. I mean, really bad if we're being honest. Again, from an uncon split, I predicted them very highly for these finals because they were uncon. I mean, they should have done way better. I feel like they kind of bottled a really good opportunity here, if we're being honest. I know the zones didn't pull their way, but still. We had Darkus and Minori and Giras and Cheating conning each other, and that did kind of ruin both of their grand finals. Of course, Hutty and Volko, neither of those teams able to make it, and all the Southeast teams did bad, with the possible exception of Izzy and Nosif, because they were all just contesting each other every game. You have the likes of Ping and Ghost, who were oscillating between the split that Wheat and Synod were landing on. They were oscillating between Cluster Coast. Some games they were turning up at Frosted Flats, so there were a lot of teams on the map that were kind of just didn't really have a set drop spot and were just landing at random places every game, and generally those are the ones that were low down on this leaderboard. Now over on NA Central, we did have some European teams playing. We had Moneymaker and Fanayan nearly secure the land spot. It was very close. Unfortunately, they just missed out in the final two games, but they did have some excellent moments. They actually managed a game win on day two. They also lurked on Peterbot and Poyo and took Peterbot out of the game. So Moneymaker and Fanayan were teeny stratting, and they were certainly influencing the lobby over on NA, so fair play to them. The fact that a duo like Moneymaker and Fanayan, that was tier 3 at the maximum on EU, was able to do this well on NA Central and nearly qualify for LAN does speak a lot about the region, let's just say. We also had Queasy win a game alongside Victor V. Unfortunately, they were one spot off securing the Globals qualification. Hopefully they can make it through in the last chance finals. We did actually have one European player qualify for Globals though. That was of course Venno, who came in 3rd place with his duo mate Ages, so they will be going to Belgium. Fair play to them. Now I mentioned earlier that another European duo had secured their spot in Belgium, and that was Howley and Lucia, who won FNCS on Middle East. That's right, they switched regions to have the best possible chance of qualifying for Globals, and they absolutely dominated the region. They were teeny stratting, which is crazy. They didn't even have a set drop spot, and they won by 130 points, and that was whilst they had 2 poor last games. After 10 matches, they had a 200+ point lead, so absolutely dominant from the Russian-speaking duo. We will be seeing them at Globals, and credit to them for getting their first ever FNCS win. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with European Fortnite news. I will be covering the last chance finals on this channel. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one.